it that every time I put something somewhere, it's always missing? I think you put it somewhere.
I didn't do it. Why do I always get the blame? You're listening to Marriage Mania, where we are audacious, sagacious, and tenacious for the Lord to uphold godly marriages and to raise fervent children who are countercultural and stand for biblical truth.
Welcome back. I'm Tanya.
And I'm Michael.
And those are big things. Every time we are looking for something in the house, there's always accusations that happen, right? It's hilarious. And so today I want to talk about accusations, and I want to talk about how things in the home just somehow disappear and we get accused of being the ones who did it. So I know this is going to be kind of a funny take on this, but it's serious. And I want to make sure that we take some biblical principles from this. But, one of the things we were laughing about the other night was we were missing something. I can't remember what it was, but our daughter was like, where is I think it was some paper she was looking for. And I said, well, I don't know. Ask Daddy. He probably put it somewhere. And you were like, I have no clue what you're talking about. And then that same day, I think we said something about, we were talking about the garden. And I came in after walking, and it was kind of funny because I was like, oh my gosh, something happened to my tomato plants. Michael, did you cut the tops off of my tomato plants? and you were like, what? And I was like, did you do that? You cut the tops off my tomato plants. What did you say?
I don't remember. I was so confused. I think I was just like, well, I noticed that the tops were off of there too. I just wondered what happened.
And I was like, did you cut them? And you were like, I didn't do anything. I made accusations. As soon as I came in the house, I was like, you did it. You were the one. And we were talking about this the other day with our daughter saying, man, it's kind of comical because everything that happens in the house is always Daddy's fault. Like, you hid this, it's Daddy's fault, or we lose this, it's Daddy's fault, and we were like,
there's water on the sink, and it's Daddy's fault.
Yes.
Found out there was a leak in the sink.
I know,
it was caused by a leak.
That was one of our funny podcasts. But how are you feeling with all these accusations?
I don't know. It's kind of crazy. It's like, man. It's funny, but it's not unusual. Evidently, they say that a good majority of the disagreements that we have in marriage is based on assumptions that we make. It's not even based on facts. We connect the dots. We assume reality, and you know what they say about assumptions? We make the first three letters out of you and me.
Yeah,
and it's true because we tend to jump to conclusions, and we're almost always, if not always, wrong. And so that's why a good rule of thumb is to always assume positive intent, the most positive thing you can until you know otherwise.
Right.
Assume the most positive thing you could possibly. You see that there's tops off of the plants. Don't just assume that the person for some reason cut the tops off of these plants.
And that's terrible.
Right? What's the most positive thing we could think?
Yeah.
Like, well, maybe there's a wind blew it over or something. I don't know.
Or maybe a deer. Yeah. Or a raccoon,
right? Some kind of animal,
or a rabbit
probably
that
what happened.
Has been hanging out in our backyard. But here's the thing: it's funny because I think you said, yeah, it's not like I'm sitting here trying to plot things against my own family, and we had such a funny laugh about that. But I started thinking about it. I was like, wow, I'm making accusations of my husband or our daughter, and then. Sometimes I'll get accusations of me, like, oh, Mom did this. And I'm like, I didn't do anything. Like, I wasn't even a part of the whole situation. So how did I get involved? And, but no one accuses our daughter. We don't say she did it. And but I think the point here is we can laugh about it, but it might actually hurt your feelings.
Yeah, I remember being accused of stuff all the time as a child. It's like, you always assume that the kids did it. Oh, one of the kids must have done it. And all the kids get lumped into the same category. It's like the parents versus the kids. And it's like, why am I being accused of this? I have nothing to do with it. Even if it was one of the kids, why am I lumped into the category of kids? They used to drive me crazy. School would do the same thing with teachers. I remember tons of times where the teachers say, okay, all the boys got to stay behind. All the girls get to go to lunch first because the boys were acting up. And I was like, I wasn't acting up. Why am I included in all this? Just because I'm the same gender as a few of the kids that were acting out. It's like, nobody. I'm scarred for life for these things.
And this is happening in your own home.
But that's what false accusations do to us. And and I don't know what the answer is. We could. The problem is sometimes we don't voice these accusations, and the person is just upset, never even gets a chance to defend themselves, and don't even know why the person's mad. But the other point is, you do bring it up, and now you're being falsely accused. I think it's best to just ask questions in a non-accusatory way.
Yeah.
Just like, do you know what happened to the tops off these plants? Do you know what happened to these plants? And see what the answer is, versus just going straight towards, you cut the top off these plants. Why'd you do that?
Oh, I need Jesus so much. I do. I need the Lord.
We all do. And we all do this. And we all need to examine when we make these assumptions.
Yes.
And you even find it in the Bible, and we've talked about this before. It's amazing if you start, when you read through the Bible, look for times there's assumptions everywhere that cause all kinds of problems. Saul and David is a big example. Saul just assumed David was out to kill him and take the throne. Yeah. Even David tried to prove that's not the case. And
I'm not trying to do this.
Cut off the corner of his garment while he was in the cave and showed him, look, I cut this off. I could have cut you. I could have killed you. But I didn't. Are you going to believe me now? And Saul believed him for a moment. So, well, he must be right. He was convicted.
Right.
But then he went back to his assumptions very quickly and continued a war that killed tons of people, all based on an assumption that wasn't even true.
Yeah.
And David, when he wanted to do the right thing, when the Ammonite king died, he wanted to reach out to his son, who became the king. And these were long-standing enemies of Israel. So David was doing the right thing. Let me reach out. Let me love my enemy, as God calls us to do. And he'd send a peace entourage to the new king, the son, to express his condolences. The new king jumped to a conclusion, along with his advisors, assumed this must be a trick. Why would our long-standing enemies do anything nice to us?
Assumed the trick.
So this must be just a spy out the land. And they humiliated the entourage, sent them along their way, sparked a war, which didn't need much of a spark. Tons of people died over an assumption that wasn't even true.
Yeah, and Nehemiah, we were just talking about Nehemiah too. Like these guys making assumptions of like what Nehemiah is trying to do, build the wall, and
right, in order to hurt them in some way,
right?
And just to completely assume. I'm telling you, assumptions are everywhere, and there's a lot of our disagreements that we have are based on assumptions. And we're accusing somebody or over things, or we're upset at something. The other person is trying to defend themselves, but we don't believe them because there's no other possible explanation for this except that you did this, and I know you did. Our brains just naturally catastrophize. we think the worst.
You're right.
For some reason.
You're right,
and we need to counter that by assuming the best. Yes. Until you know otherwise, assume the most positive thing you can. If you really need to know, ask questions. Don't just assume or criticize in some way. Just ask what happened here and see what their
I feel so bad. But it probably goes back to like, when we're trying to clean up and we're having guests and we have papers everywhere, you just kind of put them all together and just throw them somewhere. And so we're like, what happened here? The papers are missing. Oh, I just put them up there. So then I think those have become little accusations like, okay, daddy must have like tried to clean something up and put it away.
Well, that's a good point. And I like what you're pointing out there, because that's where kind of assumptions come from. We connect the dots in this situation by things that happened in the past. And therefore, I know this perfectly characterizes what they do. So they must have done it. And so then we accuse them. And so, we use kind of like past incidents to kind of connect the dots in this present one. And then we accuse it. But even if somebody did something in the past, doesn't mean that they did it in this situation.
You're right.
And so, false accusations can really cause a lot of problems, and not accusing somebody, but just stirring up and getting angry inside because they did that can cause a lot of problems too. And the other person doesn't even know why you're angry. It's all these assumptions.
It's really bad.
We're hammering this point, but it is a big studies show it's a big problem out there. A vast majority of our disagreements that we're having, destructive disagreements in our relationships, are actually based on assumptions. We are connecting the dots, and we're connecting the dots in a negative way. It's what our brains tend to do. And if we don't intentionally try to counter that by, let me be intentional about assuming the most positive thing I can based on what I know, and then ask questions in a non-accusatory way in order to find out what's going on. Unless we intentionally do that, we tend to assume wrong, and we tend to cause a lot of problems with our assumptions. And it's a big problem in relationships out there. And we see it all over the place in the Bible, all these assumptions. So if it happens in the Bible, it happens to us too, unless we are intentional about preventing it from happening. So be on the lookout for that in your own disagreements, and be on the lookout for it in the Bible when you're reading through the Bible. Like, oh, wow, there's another assumption. Oh, wow, there's another assumption. They're everywhere, even in the Bible, and all the problems that it causes by people assuming things, by connecting the dots with assumptions.
I'm sorry that I assumed that you cut my plants. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was like, you got my tomato plants, and you ended up getting my cucumber plants, and you got my cantaloupe plants, and even my cilantro.
I guess did that come from, like, I would prune them when they get like really tall, but these are like really small. I mean, they're just little seedlings kind of thing. So you assume like for some reason I pruned.
I don't know, but I was so happy after a walk, and then I go in the backyard and I'm like, let me go check out my plants, and I was like, oh my gosh, Michael, why did you cut? Like, I immediately, Michael, cut them, because I know you prune like our butterfly bushes, and I always get so upset.
I'm constantly pruning stuff.
And and like just the other day, you you quietly pulled out the tool,
the pole pruner.
Yes, and then you went up to the tree, and I was like, no, don't do it. And you're like, why? And I'm like, don't. And you went, chop, and we were all so upset. I was like, why did you do that?
Weird little branch coming out of the tree, and like, y'all
felt, it's a beautiful tree.
Y'all like, you killed the little branch. I'm like, I killed a branch? The Bible even tells us to prune trees. It helps trees. It helps plants to prune. You do that in a way that makes them look nice. You steer them growing in the right direction instead of just going crazy. And it actually helps them grow when you thin out.
It broke my heart.
I felt sorry for this little branch.
I did, because that's like my favorite tree. So I think that's where these assumptions come from. So I come in the house, and I'm like, and you're eating your morning nutrition, you're chewing, and I'm like, did you cut my plants, my vegetable plants? And you're like, no, I didn't do that. And I was like, did you not notice? You're like, come to think of it, I think I noticed that the other day. And I was like, oh my gosh, you could have said something.
Yeah, I forgot, and I was wondering what happened to it too. I was thinking maybe it was.
You didn't assume I did it.
No, I thought it was a storm. I thought I was like, okay, did we have a storm come through? Did it just like? Yeah, we did have some rain, and so I was like, did the rain somehow? I did cause some of them to bend over, so I needed to like attach them to the stake, and I was wondering if it broke off the tops of some of these plants. I was like, well, that's odd, and I meant to tell you about it, but then forgot.
But the deer, it had to be the deer. Well, we're making assumptions.
We're accusing the deer now
because you saw a raccoon in the backyard, so it could have been
a raccoon. We've seen a lot of wildlife.
A deer, or it could have been a rabbit. We don't know until we actually identify who it was.
We need some cameras out here.
But I guess the whole point here is making assumptions, and we can laugh about it, but I actually kind of saw you're like, I didn't do it. Like, you felt defensive. You were defensive about it, of course, because you're like being accused, and
something goes wrong. And it's like, why am I getting accused of everything? It must have been Daddy, Michael.
I know. So like our daughter, like we were laughing so hard about it, and we're like, Daddy gets accused of everything. Ha 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 ha. And you were sitting on the couch. You were laughing too. You're like, yeah, it's not like I'm trying to like, intentionally trying to corrupt something. And, biblically that is not right. And so I'm really sorry for doing that. And I want to do better at making those assumptions. But like, you brought in good points. And we've said this in previous podcasts where you've got Paul, who is going to the island of Malta, and the native people there saw Paul when he came off the boat, and they saw him in chains. They saw him getting bitten by a snake by the fire. And they were like, oh man, he deserved to die because he's getting bitten. Look at that. He
must have done something really
wrong.
horrible. Yeah.
But the word specifically says when Paul shook off the snake off his arm, and notice that he didn't die right away. The native people immediately, it says, changed their minds. He must be a god.
Both assumptions were wrong.
Right.
Both distorted the message that Paul came to speak about.
I've spoken about this in previous podcasts where that specific scripture really spoke to me and convicted me of assumptions. So it's probably something that the Lord is still working. Not probably, the Lord is still working in my heart to make those assumptions. And I don't want to make those assumptions in our home because that can hurt, the family. And
or at work. I remember on my job, as a police officer, if somebody was on a call for a while, everybody was constantly talking. Well, they must be milking the call. They're just being lazy. They won't clear from the call and get back to running calls.
And that's not true.
And it's like, I would always challenge them. What's your evidence for that? How do you know? How do you know they're not just tied up on a whole bunch of paperwork and a bunch of charges and arrests that they did? I know that was the reason I was always on a call for a while. And I was like, man, it was always a big worry of mine. I need to hurry up and clear as fast as I can because I know people are talking about me thinking I'm just being lazy.
And I think that can also create insecurities in ourselves, feeling that other people are talking about us. So it's probably just best to just keep your mind set on Christ, not make assumptions, and just really have a positive outlook on that person's intent is positive. And so I think those are important. And like you said, that leads to conflict. And we really need to make sure that we're not creating conflict in our home. And I love that we can understand each other's conflict styles, as we talked about that in the conflict manual, where I know you wrote this book around the conflicts that people can have, and we illustrate different conversations in that book. You can get that information in the comments, but it's just really important that we understand where we're coming from and really take time to listen and not make accusations. So again, I apologize, and I'm really sorry for thinking that you cut the tops of my tomatoes.
Well, I forgive you, and I thank you for that apology. And it was a funny moment too. It wasn't like a mean accusation that you gave. It was kind of funny when you.
It was kind of funny
when you said it, but you did accuse me, and I was like, why am I getting accused for chopping off the tops of
poor guy? I'm sorry. And so we just really need to know that those are important things that we don't want to hurt our spouse or our children. So I hope that this podcast, it was something that, we do need to address. Assumptions are really important. We deal with them all the time. Each one of us, either in our homes, outside of our homes, at work, at the grocery store, whenever we meet people, at church, and we need to assume the best until, we have some kind of evidence that we can't believe what they're saying. And so making assumptions can really hurt the other person. If you found this podcast helpful, please give us a thumbs up. We are so thrilled that we can get this podcast to reach many people, many marriages, and many homes. And so if you want to support us, there are many ways that you can do that by looking at our comments with our resources regarding the conflict manual, or other ways that you can support us. That would be so helpful for this ministry. Until next time.
God bless.